Welcome to the pod, and we've spent a lot of time through the years talking about conferences dying, fighting, breaking apart. It's all good, real fun, uplifting stuff. Looks like we got one coming back off the operating table. There's been a resuscitation of the Atlantic Coast Conference. Reports of my demise were premature. Ross, ACC, and ESPN have formally agreed to a media contract extension that runs through 2036. Seems to be a ending or near ending of Florida State and Clemson suing the league. There are some other provisions involved in trying to create more value for certain value programs. And maybe most interesting for fans who aren't all into spreadsheets, beyond presumably keeping the ACC together for the next decade or so, Notre Dame will play either Clemson. They'll play 2 games each year against either Clemson, Miami, or Florida State, bolstering the Fighting Irish's schedule and giving us more good games. What happened? Because I was told when those suits were filed that Clemson and FSU probably had secret deals to go to the Big Ten. I was told I was an idiot for not believing that.
Oh, we were all told.
Yeah.
Seems like no. We're keeping the band together.
Yeah, well, the ACC's deal, although many people talked a lot about how it extended through 2036, it really only extended through 2027. But ESPN had the option, and the deadline was February 1, I believe, had the option to pick up the 9 years. And most people just assumed that ESPN would do that. That was kind of an expectation. Obviously, we talked a lot about the ACC contract and how maybe less valuable it is as far as payouts than the Big Ten and SEC, which is one of the reasons Clemson and Florida State were trying to leave. But to that end, it was a good deal for ESPN. So, of course, they would pick it up, right? They would extend it, and that's exactly what's happened, despite 2 of the bigger, most valuable programs trying to leave. And I think that probably tells you those 2 programs aren't leaving anytime soon. And I think, there's steps in the process of settling to get Clemson and Florida State, to stay in the league. And this was one of the steps. I think the second step is now finalizing their settlement agreement, which I think we first reported about back in September. They've been negotiating now for a good while. And I think you'll see in the coming weeks probably them settle on something, and the lawsuits probably go away, and they remain in the league at least temporarily over the next few years, with some changes to potentially the grant of rights penalty structure and some maybe new, as we wrote about, and I know we talked about in the pod back in September, some new bonus type pool money for the bigger brands in the league based on brand value and TV metrics and things like that. So more money and maybe less penalties tied to the grant of rights to settle with them. So that's kind of like a little bit of what's happening here. I don't think the extension with ESPN changes the ACC contract all that much at all. I don't get the sense that there's any more real value, but there is this scheduling deal, as you mentioned, Dan, involving Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. It seems like that is part of the settlement with Clemson and Florida State as well. Those are discussions. So the settlement seems to be 3 parts. The scheduling arrangement to play more big games and big brands to reduce the grant of rights in some way, the penalties tied to it, and then this extra bonus TV pool. And that all works together with ESPN's extension. So you needed to get that done first. That's been done, and now we move on.
We move on, and yeah, we keep it together. I think this is a good development in general for college athletics. It's a really good development for the ACC, which we spent, I don't know, like 15 months talking about how this league was falling apart, dying, being attacked from within, so on and so forth. So now we can talk about them surviving for the time being, and perhaps being better off for it. I think that I thought it was all along. I thought it was incredibly obnoxious and perhaps presumptuous from Florida State and Clemson. Florida State did the public saber rattling, Clemson a little less so, but to basically lead people to believe, yeah, we got all these options out there. People are just dying to come get us. No, they weren't. And the amount of bravado that went along with it, and I think the amount of damage they did to the ACC brand, frankly, over the last year was significant. And they are getting something out of this, and if they want to claim victory because they're going to be a little bit better compensated in terms of share of revenue, fine. But they did a lot to put the ACC in jeopardy, I think, and I'm glad the ACC has survived, and I would like now for the Florida State people to go ahead and show us the secret agreement with the Big Ten. Because they were playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers, baby. Mm-hmm. I was told as much.
Well, one thing when we talk about the demise of the ACC and all the talk about it and writing and all that stuff, oftentimes we get blamed for this. The media gets blamed for calling the demise of the league and writing about it and writing headlines about it. As Pat just said pretty well, two of the league's members were trying to leave, and one of them publicly criticized the league and the league's leadership multiple times. We can't just, as media members, ignore that. So I feel like I get emails and calls from people all the time about you're trying to destroy our league kind of thing. Okay, you had two members trying to leave. We're just reporting what's going on with those members and what they said. And it's been, I feel like it's been frustrating the last year or so covering what's going on with this conference, because I feel like the media has been blamed for things when really the fingers should be pointing at the two conference members that were trying to leave and making public statements that were probably not helpful to the conference.
I mean, it's an excellent point, but I still blame you, Ross. Just because it's fun. Just fun.
Thanks, Dan.
It's Ross Dellenger's fault. I mean, there were lawsuits. I mean, what do you want to do, right?
Yeah. Detailed lawsuits with critical documents and all this data from both of these members, especially one.
Yeah. It was real. They were trying to get out. If there had been a secret deal, they would have taken it. Look, the loss of the Pac-12 was bothersome, troubling. It sucked. There's nothing good about it. You can hear it still in the complaints of Mick Cronin at UCLA, the UCLA basketball coach, is just going on a warpath of how stupid this is. And he's not wrong. Front Office Sports had this story on all the travel woes of Cal and Stanford, the volleyball team trying to get around. And it's just, the whole thing sucks. Washington State, Oregon State, we don't have to mention. We don't want to lose these leagues. And the idea, too, that there's a lot of people screw it, let the ACC die. Either the SEC or Big Ten will get a little better of a TV part. Dude, we want all of these places to go and succeed, and the ACC's fun. And I'm very happy that for at least the time being, it seems like this league is going to hold together. Because why the hell? How do you like college sports and want to see the ACC die?
Yeah, makes no sense.
I get that these university athletic departments and presidents and stuff, they just chase money. I don't know that they're fans. I think it's myopic. It's short-sighted. And they just Pac-12 died. How is this better? If you like college athletics, how would you? Believe me, just because your school gets a little more revenue doesn't mean they're going to win. And we've seen that. And most of this money gets wasted on coaching contracts and it used to get, at least now to go to players, it's at least a little different. It used to just get done on, let's just build another facility and let's just oh, our coaches now don't have to fly commercial. Isn't that great? Like, really? That's what we.
That's why you want to go to the country club and brag about. Well, our school's got better private jet hours than yours.
We have more private jet hours. I'm like, well, I kind of liked when Oregon State and Oregon played. I don't know. This isn't impact me. So the idea the ACC was going to split, and that was really going to be a huge block to what was going to end up being, if we ever get to, which I am still dubious that we will, some kind of super league. No, I don't want that. Sorry, I want Wake Forest to exist. I want Boston College to have teams. I want Pitt to have a season where they get go. I don't want this. So I guess my question is, does this, and I know this is a terrifying question and prediction, but with all 4 leagues kind of set and a playoff structure, which I think people in the ACC and every league will look and go, hey, this is not a bad thing for us if we have this automatic path to the title, to the championship. Could there be a calm? This may be the stupidest thing I ever have said on this podcast, which would be quite a thing. But
that's a long list.
Could there be a calm?
Dan, don't do it. Dan, don't jinx it. Dan. No.
Do we have to do any emergency pods of a day? I mean, could Big 12? All right, you guys kind of found your space. You got your lane. ACC, you got your lane. SEC, you got your money. Big 10, you got your money and your travel woes and whatever the hell chaos you got. Could we have calm?
Man, it's a lot to ask.
It is.
It's a lot to ask.
It is.
My gosh,
Like, what's the domino now?
Well, Ross probably has better insight into it than I do. But the 2 things that I'm looking at in terms of where are they going to screw up next is whether the autonomous 4 conferences are going to basically take over postseason, which I think would be a terrible decision. But I think it's ones that remains on the table. And then whatever other machinations the SEC and Big Ten have when they are going to meet later this month in New Orleans to, further try to divide and conquer. That's what I'm looking at as far as what's going to ruin the calm. Those things. Ross might have more.
Well, yeah, I think until maybe 2030 or 31, which is when a lot of these kind of TV deals start to come open, right? It does seem like we'll have a mostly calm realignment on the conference realignment front. Should be mostly calm, outside of perhaps some shuffling and things on a G5, G6 level, right? I think in the power conferences seem to be set for maybe 6 more years. Although I wouldn't be surprised if there's movement on the G6 level, and perhaps even G6 level teams, maybe 1 or 2 going up too.
I thought it was G5. How many leagues we got?
Well, it's a debate on the Pac-12.
The Pac-12's coming back
right would be the G6.
I gotta do now. I got my
league.
Stupid nomenclature's got to get
P4, G6, all that good stuff, Dan. So, but let's hope that we have some calm until these TV deals come open in 30 or 31. A lot of them start to come open, and again, I think part of the settlement with Clemson and Florida State is going to be, or maybe, right? It's not necessarily agreed on yet. It certainly hasn't been finalized, but there is discussion around, or I should say, the proposal that Clemson and Florida State made back in the fall for a settlement included not just that bonus money, but the penalties being reduced or somehow amended as part of the grant of rights. Does that mean that by 30 or 31, the penalties are reduced enough, for them to leave or for them to afford to leave? Is there going to be a spot for them? It still remains a question, right? Because part of this whole deal was, and I think we talked about it and reported this last spring, it's not like it's anything new. I know Pat has written it too. Like there's no desire in the Big Ten and SEC to take more schools that are going to cost the current members more money. They don't want to, they're not going to take a reduction in distribution. That's always been the case. And so that's kind of left Florida State and Clemson with, at least for now, nowhere to go. So yes, let's hope for calm, Dan. Let's hope for calm. Fingers crossed.
All right. Might be my worst prediction, but go ahead, Rob. Pat.
Yeah, no, the other thing I would say, yes, everything you said about the demise of the Pac-12 is 100% my feelings as well. Terrible, terrible development. Not good for anyone. But I will say the ACC expansion has had some benefits for the ACC as a whole. It hadn't necessarily, I'm not sure it's been good for Stanford to fly across the country or Cal to fly across the country, but from a competitive standpoint, SMU made the championship game of the league, made the college football playoff. That was a successful addition from a competitive standpoint. Basketball, men's basketball-wise, SMU right now, probably a tournament team. Stanford, bubble team. They've both been good. So they've had some additions there in the two glam sports, and they certainly have helped the Olympic sports outlooks, both of them and California. So I'm not happy they're in the ACC, but if the alternative is them, just kind of wandering off into oblivion with Oregon State and Washington State, it's been good. So I think the ACC had something good come out of that.
Yeah.
Well, let's not forget, too, what the ACC's expansion brought the league, and because of the pro rata clause in the ESPN contract, it brought them 3 more distribution units from ESPN. I can't remember right now what that amount was, but I mean, it was multiple millions of dollars. And that money, right, is now being used probably to create this new, that we've talked about, this new like uneven kind of distribution within the conference to hold the conference together. And what's ironic about this is obviously, the programs, the big brands that are trying to leave voted against the expansion that brought the league this money that they will eventually probably benefit from. So, in short, there's a lot going on in the league.
Here's what I hope going forward. And this is how they could have saved the Pac-12. And at one point it was proposed, was the Big Ten, instead of rating the Pac-12, just had a scheduling agreement in football and maybe a little bit in basketball. And they should have just stuck with that. Because really, like, you can say, all right, Oregon benefit. Well, they're going to make some more money. They have more money, right? And they got the game against Ohio State and they got to go to Michigan. You can set that up without destroying everything. And it can really get set up. I do not know how television deals work, but I do know that ESPN has exclusive rights to the SEC and the ACC. And so it would seem possible that going forward, if you get to this part, it'd be more seamless if this is possible. I guess that's really all I'm saying, where maybe it was tougher with Fox and somebody else involved. But where you could sit there and say, hey, instead of blowing these leagues up, and maybe by 2036 or whenever this goes back into thing, or 2031, where it's a little different world, we just say, hey, we're going to have more merged schedules. There's going to be you're going to play an SEC team every year. Maybe you play 2. Maybe we stack it a little like they do in those challenges, right? So yeah, Mississippi State, you didn't have a great year. Well, neither did Wake Forest. We're going to have you 2 play. And it's all under one umbrella and everybody benefits. That's kind of what I hope, is there's some common sense instead of just like, well, that's it. Some of you guys are out. Some of you guys are inconvenienced, and we just blow the whole thing up so we can get Clemson play in Georgia, right? Well, we can have Clemson play Georgia, right? You want Oregon to play Ohio State? We could have done that. They did that before, but you could do that. And then you don't have, look, the idea that UCLA basketball is kind of like just maybe the most historic of all college sports teams is sitting around going, we can't do this. This is ridiculous. And you're like, yeah, it is. You guys should be, we've talked all the time about like Olympic sports particularly should just be regionalized. Forget the leagues, right? If you're Georgia, you're a team at Georgia, you could be playing Georgia Tech and Georgia Southern and driving over. Like, you don't have, everything doesn't have to be like, well, we only do this, right? I saw Michigan State had it was on TV. I didn't watch the thing, but I just saw it was like UCLA versus Michigan State in a gymnastics meet. Okay, I'm sure it was great. It was on TV, right? It's great for both, but it's like, is that really necessary, or would it have been that bad if Michigan State had just driven over to Notre Dame and had a meet? Like, or Western Michigan. I don't know. I don't know enough.
You're being too sensible now, Dan.
But could we get there if there's one umbrella of television and you're like, hey, we're better together. Let's just get the games that add the value for everybody, and we don't have to blow everything up. And if the SEC doesn't have to become a 22 team league, and it can keep its rivalries. It's a lot to ask, I know.
Yeah, it is. You're asking for peace in our time and for television people to, think about the children, so to speak, and
if you can make it so they think everybody's profiting, maybe, I don't know.
Dare to dream. I mean,
we might, to go back to your comment about realignment and it calming down, we may not have any big realignment this offseason, but this is potentially going to be the busiest offseason in college sports history. And I think I wanted to just quickly go through 4 things that everybody should be watching as we head into this offseason. And obviously, it's one we talked about a lot, the House case and the revenue share. There'll be an incredible amount of changes tied to that. There was objection. The deadline for objections to the House case was Friday. There was a bunch of them, but probably not enough. You talk to attorneys, probably not enough to sway the judge. But the final hearing to approve the settlement is April 7th, the day of the national championship game and men's basketball tournament. And she might not approve it that day, but there's a hearing. So there's the House case to watch, the CFP format, and the changes to the playoff format starting in the 2026 year. There's the Big Ten SEC scheduling agreement and whatever else they might be up to going on. And then lastly, as Pat mentioned, I think is the NCAA governance changes in which, is postseason control as well, with the power leagues wanting postseason control. A lot of this all works together. But these are things that this offseason will be really key to watch going forward. So hopefully no realignment on top of that.
Maybe they're too busy. I do know one thing that may not happen, and that's the Nebraska spring game. And we're going to talk about that right after this. Just repeat what you just said, Pat. That was a nice segue by me, wasn't it?
Impressive hostmanship there.
Daring to suggest there may not be realignment is likely to blow up on me, but I do have this.
Yeah. A rare good transition there.
Nebraska coach Matt Rule. It is midwinter press conference is how it was referred. I love a Nebraska. It's a midwinter. It's like fireside. Midwinter. Midwinter in Lincoln is it's a lengthy. Everyone get excited for the midwinter speech. Nebraska spring games, the AP, one of the best attended in college football and a major revenue producer, likely won't be held going forward because of Coach Matt Rule's concern about other teams poaching his players. Quote, the word tampering doesn't exist anymore, Rule said Saturday at his midwinter news conference. It's an absolute free, open, common market. I don't necessarily want to open up to the outside world and have people watch our guys and say, he looks like a pretty good player. Let's go get him. I dealt with a lot of people offering our players a lot of opportunities, that he said after last year's spring game, which was televised on the Big Ten network. To go out and bring a bunch of new players, showcase them for all the other schools to watch doesn't make a lot of sense to me. They had 60,000 last year, 4th highest behind Ohio State, Alabama, and Penn State. There's been great moments at that game. There was the just some different things. Matt Rule, does he have a point, Pat?
Well, I mean, I think there's other schools that are doing the same thing, that are like, we are keeping our spring practices under wraps and uneventful for that very reason, is to limit the amount that potential tamperers can see of our players. So, yeah, I mean, I think so. First of all, as I've said many times, I hate spring football, so I don't care what they do with the games. If they don't want to play them, that's perfectly fine with me. But if they feel like it's a necessary step to perhaps protecting their roster, I get it. I kind of still think most people know who's on what teams already and have a decent idea at least of who can play and can't play, and might be able to go ahead and tamper anyway without watching a spring game. But if the coaches and the programs feel like they need to do it, I got no problem with it.
Yeah, this has been something I think a lot of coaches don't want to see don't want to put their players on display. And this has been something buzzing probably the last like 2 or 3 months. A lot of coaches just don't want to play a traditional spring game. And we've seen coaches get away from spring games recently. I mean, Lane Kiffin comes to mind, right? And you just kind of have like a festival for fans, and they've kind of turned into spring games into like the Pro Bowl games instead of the Pro Bowl. It's kind of a similar type of deal, and I would expect that going forward. I kind of think in 2 years or 3 years there will not be any kind of any school playing a traditional spring game.
Yeah, I'm not a spring game fan, but other people are, and I get that's cool. If people want to do it, look, 60,000 people show up. They got something to do. They're excited about their team. I don't have a problem with it. I'm not really going to watch, but I think they have. It isn't the old games were like real games, but this was back in a time frame when coaches would run Oklahoma drills all week, and they had, if guy got hurt, no coach wants to be the one that's like, I just lost my star player in an exhibition game because he tore his ACL and he's out for the year, and no one wants to do that, nor should they. So I think they've lost some of the where you really got to watch players. I also think there's more information and promotion to those hardcore fans who you're kind of. The 60,000 that show up, most of them know everything already, and they're hearing other things. It used to kind of be like, okay, the season ended. You played a bowl game on like December 27th. You heard nothing, right? There were no beat writers covering the offseason. There weren't shows like this. And then it was like mid-April, and here's the team, and you're like, look at this guy,
Right, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of ways.
Guy redshirted last year. He's really good.
Yeah. Hey, that sophomore has got some promise. And then you get excited and you sell some tickets and stuff like that. The bowl games have turned a little bit into that, where you see next year's guy get a chance, although a little less this year because some of the NIL kept guys playing. So I don't see this as a calamity if we lose the spring game. I think what Lane Kiffin did and stuff like that, but it is something. I mean, if you're worried about your players getting poached, you're worried about tampering. I don't see tampering as policeable. So I've kind of mocked the idea of tampering, but I certainly understand if you're a coach, you're like, I don't want that. Yeah, I'd probably cancel my spring game too, or do something else. I think that's what they'll probably end up doing. It's too good of a tradition not to do something, right?
Yeah, I mean, no, the fans generally, you start getting a little jonesing to see something or hear something about your team.
Get
so
the
yeah, you
tailgate going.
But yeah, right. Put on a little festival, do your skills competition or whatever. By the way, the most interesting part of the Pro Bowl, whatever the hell it was seeing the next Manning, Marshall Manning, Peyton's kid, out there throwing passes,
Really?
looking rather precocious. And I will say, so I was at the Manning Passing Academy for a day in June to do a Jalen Milroe story. And at the beginning of the day of camp, they bring everybody together and they got somebody announcing we're going to do this, this, and this. But right before the players all break up, the little campers, and go to their different areas, they run through a list of everybody who left their equipment, their football here, their cleats there, their jersey there. Marshall Manning got called out for leaving his stuff. So, no favoritism at the Manning Academy for a little Manning who misplaced his gear.
Wow. Do we have a word on does he have a Final Five yet? He's 13.
No, he's a little ways away. But
Tennessee. Oh, this is going to be it. Will a Manning finally go to LSU? I can't wait. Let's just start. Let's just start
It'll be about right. We will transition out of the Arch Manning podcast into the Marshall Manning podcast. It's going to work. The timing's going to work on this.
Remember Clark Francis of the Hoop Scoop? He was a recruiting guy. He would put out like fourth graders, top 10 fourth graders in America.
Top fifth graders in the nation. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing of all time.
He kind of hit on a bunch of them, though. Like, it was ridiculous, but he'd have, like, Stephen Marbury on there, and he's like, if you're thinking about how impossible it is to say a 12-year-old is going to be an NBA player, like, he'd hit on, like, 3 of them. I mean, there's NBA GMs that don't do that well, but yes, it was ridiculous. It led to more ruin than actual.
Yes, how many did he miss on where the parents all of a sudden like, oh, my God, we got the number 1 fifth grader in the country. Better start working on it.
Because he's like a 5'2" center.
Yeah.
and didn't pan. Or he was like 5'8". He was like 5'8" at the time. He's like 11. He's like, oh, this kid's in the post moves are great. And he grew to 5'10". Yeah. It didn't always work out. But yeah, hey. Not with Marshall. All right, we'll spare. Although if they're throwing him into the Pro Bowl, it's not like they're hiding him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got that. Yeah, spring game, RIP. I don't know. Ohio State is down another coordinator. Chip Kelly is headed back to the NFL. Las Vegas Raiders reported $6 million. Jim Knowles is like, what?
Yeah.
I only got 3.1. $6 million to be the coordinator. I'm sure Chip was like, I'm probably not going anywhere. Like, we'll give you $6 million. See you.
Yeah.
Should the Buckeyes be concerned, Pat?
Well, I mean, both those guys did great work. Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles, and they were good on both sides of the ball. And other than the inexplicable disaster against Michigan, I thought Chip Kelly was brilliant this past year, dialing up plays. He had great personnel to work with, clearly, but there were moments in just about every big game, Michigan excluded, where he called a play that you were like, oh, that's fantastic, and just like this great scheme and great execution. And, I think that he was a real difference maker. I think he helped make Will Howard a better quarterback. They were not hesitant at all to make a true freshman receiver a centerpiece. They did a great job working with 2 different running backs. So I thought those were big additions for Ohio State, and now they're big subtractions. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, the next guy you get's probably not going to be as good as Chip Kelly. Maybe the next defensive coordinator is going to be as good as Jim Knowles, but also he did a fine job as well. So some interesting transition here for Ohio State, which continues to kind of follow the Michigan pattern, which lost a head coach and both coordinators. Well, they elevated Sharon Moore, but they had some major staff changes as well coming off of their championship.
Remember the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the meme with Will Smith, and he's standing in the living room, and it's an empty living room, and he's just like, where did everybody go? No furniture's in there, nothing. It's gone, except for maybe a carpet. Somebody had subbed Will Smith for Ryan Day, standing around like, where did everybody go? What happened? Because, coordinator, they're looking for a couple coordinators. I think a GM maybe, right? They're losing their quarterback, running backs, multiple people on the defensive front seven. I guess a rebuilding year is in store in Columbus. Kind of thought that maybe the coordinator hiring process was close to ending, but usually Ohio State at the top of the food chain, when it has openings, we'll see a domino effect, and I'm sure this will create more news over the coming week or weeks.
Rebuilding?
Restocking.
My prediction that conference realignment is going to go is now no longer the worst prediction.
Restocking, probably more like it, huh?
Reloading. It'll
Reloading.
be fine.
There you go.
They'll be
Jeremiah
fine.
Smith and Caleb Downs are still there.
I'm not too worried about that. Ohio State, like as you said, they will restock. Who doesn't want to work with that offense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to be an offensive coordinator, and we're not getting shut out if I got those guys. We would if I had someone else. They will be all right. I would not be surprised. And these salaries, like we just said, are getting so high. It's like last year they were in talks to get Toledo's head coach. Like, are they going to get a head coach to go to Ohio? I am not worried about Ohio State getting somebody. Obviously, Chip Kelly is a well-known name, and both those guys did a great job. But coordinators, they matter, obviously, but how much? They'll be okay. Also on the coordinator front, Alabama has hired Ryan Grubb as its offensive coordinator. Kalen Deboer was at Washington. Grubb was his offensive coordinator there when they went to the national championship game in the 2023 season. Grubb then went to Seattle in the NFL for 1 year, was fired. Now he is back to the college ranks, going back to work for Kalen Deboer. A lot of familiarity there. What should Tide fans think of this, Pat?
Oh, I think it's a great move. That's a good development for them. The relationship and the alchemy, if you will, between Deboer and Grubb, I thought was phenomenal at Washington. Clearly, they had great talent to work with, Michael Penix, Roma Dunze, but they had a lot of other guys that they put into positions that made huge plays. And they called super aggressive downfield games, and I thought just rocked defenses back on their heels. And if they can replicate that at Alabama, then Alabama takes a step forward, I think. We'll see about the personnel, but I thought Ryan Grubb was awfully good at Washington, and it's just a really good scheme guy and play calling guy, and working with DeBoer. I think that's a major benefit for the Tide. I like that move for sure.
Yeah, big move. And when he was fired, I think from the Seahawks, there was a pretty quick connection, obvious connection to him going back to Alabama and being with Kalen Deboer, who originally wanted him to join him, of course, last year before Ryan stuck around Seattle to coach with the Seahawks. It makes a lot of sense, and we've seen the two have incredible amount of success in the past. I think that Alabama's coordinator last year, Nick Sheridan, will stick around. I believe he's supposed to stick around along with a couple other staff members. So it doesn't sound like this is some sweeping deal that he's going to come in and change a bunch of people. It's just kind of a plug in the coordinator, and many already on staff have, I think, been under him in the past.
Yeah, I think DeBoer's got to be happy about this. It's just any little bit of comfort and advantage they have going into this year there'll be a lot. I'm not saying it's make or break for Kalen Deboer next year, but there's going to be a lot of fan attention on this team. So anything that could help him out, Ryan Grubb, they did amazing work in Washington. All right, we'll be back. Coach Cal returned to Kentucky and won college basketball that I think all college fans can understand, and we'll do a People's Court too after this. All right, low college basketball, because this, I think, extends to all of college sports. So we know John Calipari coached the Kentucky Wildcats for 15 years, 1 national title, 4 Final Fours, 7 SEC titles, and a bajillion lottery picks. Mixed bag of results, certainly based on the level of talent that he brought in. Otherwise, not really a pretty nice run, except people expected more because, well, he had half the NBA on his roster. Things got soured at the end. A lot of bad losses in March, and he up and left, walked away from what was kind of like a lifetime contract, headed to Arkansas this year, and then he returned on Saturday night. Pat, you were there. We've seen this kind of before when Rick Pitino came back, granted at Louisville, which is even more heated. I was at that one. Not much was expected of Kentucky, This was supposed to be a boo fest and a hate fest and an embarrassment to Calipari. Instead, Arkansas won 89-79. What was it like in Rupp Arena, and what do you think of these kind of games where I love when the coach has to come back. I can't get enough of these types of things.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It was so interesting. Fans came to boo Calipari, and they did. It wasn't as vicious as what Pitino got. It was not, but it was vigorous.
Why?
That's what
because it was Louisville. Because Pitino was Louisville.
Two reasons. One, a lot of the fans wanted Cal to leave anyway, right? Three reasons. They wanted Cal to leave anyway. They did not want Rick to leave when Rick left. Now, but Rick also went to the NBA first and then to Louisville.
Right.
Number two, Kentucky fans entered the gym saying, our team's better than your team. We can afford to be moderately graceful. And number three is just that the Arkansas dynamic is not what the Louisville dynamic is. So that's why it was a little less vicious, for starters. But by the end, oh boy, they were still booing, but they were booing their own team. It wasn't like Ohio State booing after they lost to Michigan, but there were absolutely audible boos in the last 3 minutes for Kentucky's players and Kentucky's coach. And I have never seen a home crowd in Rupp Arena run for the exits, like literally running for the exits in the last 3 minutes like Kentucky's fans did, because they did not want to be there to see something they did not see coming. They did not think that they were going to lose that game. And then I was like, damn it, Cal did this to us, man. They've seen enough of Cal coming out of the grave and finding a way to win a game when nobody expected him to, and then he did it to them. And it was an emotional whiplash for the fans. It was a very bad night for Mark Pope. A coach, sent me a text that I thought summed it up really well. Said, that was a poor man's Ryan Day moment for Mark. The pressure was all on his team, every bit of it, and it just intensified every minute of the second half. And it's true. This was a team where you're probably better. The other team is playing over its head. They found a couple of weaknesses to exploit, and your team is just seizing up. And your coach is seizing up, and he couldn't figure out what to do about it. And it was like amazing to watch.
Reminds me a little bit, I hate to turn it to football, but it reminds me a little bit of when Nick Saban came back to LSU. It was 2008, I think. And now things were reversed a little bit, right? Alabama was like number one in the nation. He had already gotten Alabama to number one in the nation that year, and they beat LSU in Tiger Stadium in overtime. 27-21 that 2008 year, but he came back. He was obviously vigorously booed. They didn't want him to leave. Obviously, back in 2004, he went to the NFL for a few years, and then, as he has said multiple times, Nick Saban, the opportunity to return back to LSU when he was ready to leave the NFL wasn't there, so he couldn't. Suggesting that he would have. And so that just makes LSU fans even more angry that he never came back, despite him maybe wanting to, that he was never had the opportunity to come back. And so when he returned, there were loud boos, and he went in there and he won the game. Kind of reminds me of that dynamic a little bit. I look forward to the future matchups. Hopefully we have a little more of Cal versus Kentucky through the years here.
Well, you probably will, a little bit at least. This had to have been one of the most satisfying victories of Calipari's career. And I think the part where you said nobody expected Arkansas to win the game. Like, it was like Arkansas was 1-6 in the SEC, and they had lost Boogie Fland, and they just were kind of, and Kentucky was going to roll them. And I think that part makes it even more bitter for Kentucky and more sweet. It's one thing if I was at that LSU game, that Alabama LSU game, and yeah, you roll in with your team and you're mad because like that should be our team. But this was like, I don't want your team, and you still beat us.
Yeah, because this would have been Kentucky's team this year if Calipari had stayed. It would have been the same bunch of guys, and they weren't very good. I think the Kentucky fans are like, yeah, well, we would have been 1-6 in the SEC too.
Right.
So
we're better off without this. And then all of a sudden it's like, maybe not.
Yeah.
I look at this too as this happens to play. This basketball-wise, it reminded when Carolina won the final game at Cameron Indoor of Mike Krzyzewski's career. And the emotion of, well, they can't lose. We're going to send K out. And maybe that LSU game's similar. Like, well, we can't let Nick Saban beat us when he comes back. And sometimes the players get stuck in a situation that isn't their doing. The Kentucky players are the Kentucky players. They have nothing to do with John Calipari. Maybe a couple of them, but I'm sure there's some over. But for the most part, it's like this is between the fans and the administration and this other guy, and we're supposed to deliver the shanking. We're the ones supposed to do the contract hit here. And when it started going bad, they couldn't go. It's like too much on the player. And I felt like it was like that North Carolina beat them again. And those Duke players wanted to win, obviously, Coach K's final game at Cameron. But like they had every single Duke great on the sidelines watching. And like, not only do you have the pressure of that moment, and not only do you have the pressure of having to play North Carolina, which I think won the national title that year. They closed. They lost.
Kansas beat them in the championship game.
Yeah, they made the Final Four. And not only you have the pressure of the fans and everything, and Coach K wanting to win. I mean, as great of a coach as that is, there's still probably like there's emotion and his family's there. It's like, man, I got Grant Hill, Christian Laettner, everybody, Shane Battier, like staring down at me from the third row as I dribble the ball off my knee. Like, it's too much. And I wonder how much that played into this thing. Like, what was supposed to be a nightmare for Arkansas quickly turned into the nightmare for Kentucky. What a fascinating college basketball game.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that this was not these players' fight. And they became their fight by proxy, especially when you look at the fact that virtually none of them, actually nobody that played had played for Calipari the year before. Like none of them were at Kentucky. So all of a sudden they kind of got pulled into this. And I think, as the week went on and as the day went on and as the game started, if they didn't have an idea how much was weighing on their shoulders, they got it pretty quick, because it became a very, charged atmosphere. The cheers for Pope were as loud as anything I've heard for the home coach ever in Rupp Arena. And when the game starts and Arkansas, which hasn't made any shots all year, makes their first 3 threes, you're like, oh, here we go. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, Arkansas has a game plan. They figured out we don't guard the dribble very well, and we don't rotate very well, and they're going to exploit it. And you could just see it all kind of building. And it really was, to that extent, it was like Ohio State, Michigan, where it's like, we're the better team, but we are so freaked out right now, we don't know what to do. And it just amplified.
Dangerous when you're telling people we can't lose. It just is. And, when we can't, well, Arkansas's got good players too. And they started hitting threes that they hadn't hit all year, but they were beating them to loose balls. It was a fascinating game. And I said, I think at some point, Kentucky fans are going to applaud John Calipari. He will come back as a retired coach, and they will celebrate what he did. I don't think now is the time. I had no problem with them booing him. He's at a rival school, whatever. But like they embraced Tubby Smith later. Like, this is a classy fan base that will embrace him, because he did do a lot there. And the thing I point out is it was the late 2000s, 2008, 2009. He comes in 2009. Kentucky and Indiana were in the same boat. They were these superpowers of the past that weren't winning. And it was like, we got to find the right guy and we'll be back. and Indiana's still looking. And Indiana fans would greatly love a national title, 4 Final Fours, and 7 league championships over the last 15 years. And they're sitting around going, we'll take any of that. We're going to rebuild again. So it's like, yeah, maybe he didn't win. He should have won 2 or 3 national titles, sure. But he also, the reason everyone says that is because he had so many great players that he brought in. So it's like, I think there'll be a time when Kentucky fans are like, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I would have loved more, but the more was because he delivered so much. So I think in the end, it'll all work out. But this was a night for spite. We love it. This is a night for gut punch. Somebody's nervous. Love it. And then someone was going to leave miserable and someone was going to leave ecstatic. And it just turned out to be the different guy. So that's college sports to me at its best. That felt like that sometimes college basketball games feel like college football games. That was one of them. Like everyone had circled it the whole year. All right. We got a people's court here. I got to get to. We like to, we know people listen in the car. This is slightly PG-13. I don't know, but just a warning if you're listening. You don't want to. Are you guys familiar with the East Village Pub and Eatery in Fort McMurray, Alberta? You ever been there?
As a matter of fact, no.
Yeah.
College football beat doesn't get to Alberta often.
No.
So.
And Fort McMurray is like, we're talking Canada with a capital letters. Like it is way the hell up there. Like people in Edmonton are like, I ain't going up there. Too cold. It is way up. Well, there's the East Village Pub and Eatery, I guess you go to, obviously. This I'm reading, of course, the Daily Mail. They probably have a Fort McMurray correspondent. Go there on a cold winter night and, get out of the house. Well, a guy named Blake McPhee went there and had a little too much, got a little drunk, started getting into some arguments with some other bar goers. And they decided to take it outside to, put up your dukes, man. And as the frontier town of Fort McMurray, that's how you settle things. And it was well below zero. So there was a little fight, and the security guards were there. And in the scuffle, McPhee's pants fell down. Shirt kind of got ripped off, and his pants fell down. And he wound up flat down on the ground, which, of course, is covered with ice.
Oh, I know. I don't like where this is going.
I don't like where this is going either, Dan.
You know that, what's the movie with the Christmas Story where you double dog dare the guy to stick your tongue to the...
Oh, no, Dan.
And it freezes. Dan. You stick your tongue to a frozen pole. And that I double dog dare, you couldn't turn it down, and it's stuck, and they had to bring in the fire department. Something stuck to the ground.
No.
Something stuck to the ground. Double dog horrified.
Oh, no.
Now, we don't have too much. Let's not have too much sympathy for Mr. McPhee. He was fighting and being a jerk and kicking a security guard and all that. So no one was really but he was pushed down on the ice with no pants, and something stuck.
Damn.
Possibly, this violates the Geneva Convention if it was done on purpose, right? I think this would be...
This is barbaric.
Illegal, barbaric. And there's even the worst torturers out there are like, oh, come on now. You cannot have that.
Yeah.
They lifted him up rather forcefully and left some behind. Little skin behind.
See, I was trying to think of a way out of this. Can you just pour warm water underneath them there?
Yeah,
you could have if they didn't.
That's what you should have done.
Yeah,
but they didn't do that. But then you're risking burn. There's no real good option at that point other than lay there till spring.
Yeah,
under covers. Build a house around them.
Late April. Yeah,
slow thaw.
Up there, it might be late May. Yeah.
So then they pulled him off, and all the people outside watching are filming it. It's on. If you care, there's video on TMZ.
Have you seen the video?
Unfortunately, I have, but it's not as graphic as you think. But everyone's jeering him, and then saying that what got stuck was really not a lot. Which he was responding, it's freezing out. I think he's got a point there.
No, there's the shrinkage situation.
For a time, it would be stuck to a frozen parking lot in Fort McMurray, Alberta in late January. Like, that would be the time. He's kept a good sense of humor. He went on Facebook to address the situation.
Oh, my.
Man, I don't know how I get myself in these expletive up situations. Guess that's what I get for being a drunk lunatic at a bar.
Yeah, well, there's the genesis, yeah.
Tough price to pay.
Still don't understand why it's necessary to rip my expletive drawers clean off while I'm being arrested with 3 cops and 2 security on me, but that's okay. And then really waxing poetic about how technology's ruined. Waxing.
Yeah.
Waxing.
About how that was not unintended. Technology's ruined everything, I think is what he's saying here. Gone are the days a fella can get his wiener frozen solid to the ground without it going viral.
Can't a man have his junk ripped off in private? Come on.
Anyways, glad
do we have
I can
reporting
be
on the damage here? What was the damage? Is he going to be able to have babies ever again?
I don't think it's that bad. I think it's more just a flesh wound. Surface wound. I don't know. I don't want to know. Why do you want to know this?
Yeah.
Do we want this guy having babies?
No, I don't think we do.
Anyways, glad I can be of some entertainment and back to making headlines. Gonna go crawl inside a hole and cry myself to sleep now. P.S. Sorry, Ma.
Okay.
Be careful out there, kids. You go out to try to have a nice night at the East Village Pub and Eatery and have a couple too many. Next thing you know, you're in the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
And you got something less than what you had.
Every time anybody goes out, you should think, where do I draw the line to stay out of the Daily Mail? That should always
don't
be
get in the Daily Mail is your number one thing. Do not appear.
Right? Yeah. Honey, I'm going out with the guys. And honeys, do not end up in the Daily Mail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if Mr. McPhee had a honey, she may be reconsidering now for many reasons.
Yeah.
But this guy, there it is. It actually looks like a decent place.
Does it?
Yeah, much nicer bar than I was anticipating.
Okay. Just, that I'm trying to wrap my arm around the need to then put your Facebook post out there talking about it. I think it's, let it die.
I think I appreciate going clean on it. Anyway,
I'm not talking about this just to not extend the conversation any longer.
Yeah.
Ross is ending the conversation.
Fair enough. That's our show. We'll be back later this week. Talk to you later.